All right. All right, guys. Good morning. Good morning. It's probably afternoon for some of you out there. Good evening for others. Might be middle of the night for some of our fellows that are all the way over on the other side. This is episode 5 of Elite Heroes Revival. Getting together to give some updates really as to what's been going on from the community perspective, some of the behind the scenes that we're doing with some of our code monkeys. Like I see my friend here, Rick James, in the audience. I'll actually bring you up to stage here if you want to come join me. Let's see. Pull you on up. Hey, how do I pull you up here? There we go. Invite you up to speak. Um, so yeah, we'll give some updates on how things have been going from a development side, what we've been focused on, what we're working on, and then as usual, just kind of have some good conversation around Loot Heroes, any questions that have been coming up in the Discord, just casual conversation, and where the directionality is of things that are going. So, good morning, Rick. How you doing?
Morning, sir. I'm well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing this fine Wednesday morning?
Yeah, doing great. It's a beautiful day here in St. Louis. It is hot. It's going to be a very warm day out there. So I'll be in my office here, but I've got these huge windows behind me, and the blinds are shut right now. Otherwise, I think it'd be 105 degrees in my office. So, yeah. How's the Northeast?
It's actually cold. It was 44 degrees when I was outside earlier.
Add 40 degrees to that, and you've got St. Louis weather, and it's humid. It's feeling like summertime for sure. The bugs are starting to get out a little bit.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, we've been buggy. It's supposed to get up to 70 today, though. New
yeah.
England's weird. New England, the joke is if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes
Mm-hmm.
because it will literally drastically change.
Yeah, I mean, especially since you guys have the like kind of in the mountains right there, it kind of moves through pretty quickly.
Yeah, once there's a swirling, all of a sudden it'll go from hot to cold or dried up wet or whatever.
Yep.
Hard to predict it. Everybody's always mad at the weatherman.
Right, right. See, here what we do for weather is Kansas City is, about half a day kind of weather difference. So if it's raining over there, you're like, well, I know it's going to rain later. So you kind of don't even need the weatherman. Just got to have some friends in Kansas City that you chat with and understand what's going on over there. But anyhow, we'll talk a little shop on Loot Heroes. Definitely been doing some more development. I know that you and Eduardo have really been spearheading that front, and thank you for doing that. The stuff that we're working on for, and this is more so for people that are going to probably pipe in and listen later, but the things that we've been working on have really been focused on reconnecting the bits that haven't been working. So we talked a little bit about that last week. Some of the things that were slowing us down were really just some of the pieces that we needed to still get from the former team. So I kind of think of it as like, when you're trying to pack up your house and you're like, getting all the big things in your U-Haul truck and you get your couches and beds and boxed up. And then you're like, man, I'm like 90% done. But that's that last 10% that takes like just as long as it took you to pack up all
Right.
the other big things. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of feels like the place we're at right now is those little bits and pieces, right?
Yeah, that's how it feels.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
it reminds me of like digging through luggage, but the luggage is like intergalactic type luggage that can go as deep and be as deep as possible. So the more you pull stuff out, there's just more stuff coming out. And it's like, oh, this could work with this and that. I wonder if that piece is in there. And then you find the other piece and try to get them together. Oh, we're missing this one more. And then you reach into it again. And
Yeah.
I think they're all there, but it's just a matter of connecting them all.
Yep. Yep. Like little wormholes that you need to find that takes you to the next wormhole. Um,
And then the tough thing too is all the stuff hasn't really been updated in about a year.
yeah.
So a lot of the frameworks and some of the modules and libraries have gone through drastic updates. Not necessarily the React stuff, but all of the Web3 stuff. Like every month or so, that changes pretty significantly. So a year later, a lot of it's pretty different. So that's the other thing we've been working on is upgrading something and then fixing everything it broke, and then upgrading the next thing and fixing everything it broke.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't really have a good handle on, especially since I'm not a developer. Was how quickly things can kind of go stale or stagnant. So I didn't realize that all these different updates happen. I guess it's sort of naive of me. I mean, of course these updates are happening. Even you see updates on like your iPhone all the time, right, or whatever. So sure, code must be updated constantly to patch things, vulnerabilities, whatever it is, but I hadn't really given that a lot of thought. And then as you guys been going through that process of, oh yeah, this is just sort of out of date, needs to be updated. But then to your point, when you get that updated, then you see, oh, well, this other piece that connected to that is now also broken. We need to update that too. So just a lot of sweeping up around the shop to make things tidy. And then, man, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like we're very close to getting around that corner where the
I
shop
think
is
so.
pretty tidy, and then we can just start opening for business and start doing some things.
Well, now that we have all the pieces, even though we can't get them all connected, we can see what they were all supposed to do. So if we can get those things re-implemented that we can't get connected for whatever reason, because it looked like they were using some custom versions of some libraries that have been updated significantly, but luckily the Web3 Chad that's been helping me was involved in writing the front end for it at Gem Farm, so he was so well versed in it. So he just dug right in, saw what they were trying to do, and was able to kind of replicate it. So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And good morning, or actually good afternoon, Ed. Welcome to the Loot Heroes
Hey guys,
revival. How you doing?
Hello.
exhausted at the moment. I just ended. I was in Versailles Castle with some American clients today, and usually Americans don't like to walk, so it's pretty easy for me. And this time I found some hiking people, so yeah, it was pretty intense, and I had to rush to be back on time for
Man,
a few
man.
minutes.
Well, that's pretty
Get the
cool.
blood pumping.
Getting around the castle over there. There's some
Yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
areas of France for sure, and Versailles is one of those things that's on my list for Heidi and myself. We've not been there in person, but would love to. Yeah.
yeah. Once you get rid of the kids.
Yeah, yeah. Or, I mean, hey, they might enjoy a little trip like that when they get a bit older.
Right.
Bring them along and, hey, guys, we're going to take a little trip over to France. I bet you my daughter would love to do that. So, yeah. Well, cool. Let's kind of talk a little bit about where we're at from a planning perspective. We can kind of dig in from there. So, I know that a couple of things that we already mentioned before you hopped on, Ed, was really just repairing the broken bits, and then moving forward from there. The pecking order of things, and Rick, you can kind of guide me a little bit too, because this is also dependent on where you and Eduardo think you can have the, as you mentioned, the Solana Chad. I love the role you gave him, Solana Chad. But as you guys are seeing different things that are the low hanging fruit, that's really what we're trying to go after, right? So like we were even talking this morning, Rick, about, well, hey, just staking, right? So allowing people to just unstake their heroes, claim their loot. That's the first thing that it sounds like we're gonna be able to do pretty quickly. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Working on pinning that down right now.
Yep, yep, yep. So that's sounds like will be pretty easy to check that off. And then some of the other behind the scenes talk has really been more about, okay, with the existing architecture that they've built, does it make sense after we've kind of reconnected things and seen how things are plugged back in? Do we like the architecture they've built, or do we think that we need to maybe rewrite and rebuild our own architecture? And for anybody who's listening to this later, that may sound like daunting, like, oh, is that going to take you guys like a year to do? But I don't think so, based off of what you and Eduardo have told me, that, it seems like we can do a lot of rebuilding very quickly, because a lot of the hard time intensive stuff, not that it's not time intensive to do the coding as well, but, you know, the game is built, the logic is built, the art is
Right.
there, right? All of those components that are like extremely time consuming.
That you need to figure out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, those are all done, right? So then it's really just a matter of like, okay, well, yeah, I can build us another scaffolding that works a little bit better and implement some of the things that we want to do, because, for anyone who had listened to some of the previous revivals, we are making some tweaks as to how things are going to work around here, right? So certainly that PVE domain where you've got the 8 different dungeons, one each day and 2 on Sunday. That's rotational. That'll look and feel very similar. But we still need to, even improve upon that, right? We need leaderboards so people can see where they're at from a seasonal ranking. We talked about PvP. We need to start to integrate that where it's no longer just you versus, AI computer. So in the PvP side, like that's got its own kind of architecture and scaffolding. So I don't know, Rick, do you want to just talk for a minute about some of the things that you guys think you'll start to pluck away at, related to the PvE dungeon and then the PvP side?
I was kind of hoping to get things back to where they had them and then start to talk ideas for what we want for PvP, like the 1v1 stuff, or maybe like a battle royale where it's like 4 people and it's a free for all. If there's some sort of way, and this is kind of getting complicated and getting down the road, but in a
Sure.
game like Magic, how they have the commander game format where it's like 4 people kind of against each other, but if you want you can make deals with people and use powers of yours to help other people to like get an alliance or whatever temporarily or whatever. It just adds all sorts of dynamics. If there was, you had brought up having powers that'll give you an extra turn or things like that. So once things are back to where they were and people can play with it, like things how they were, then I feel like we can try to brainstorm what everybody would like for the future, because I've got a bunch of ideas, but I can get a little distractible. I always end up going to cyborgs. I'm like, when can we get the cyborgs in?
You're like, whoa, man, like I'm not sure that meets our theme here, but hey, you never know. You never know.
I'm trying to stay on brand, but if I can squeeze in a cybernetic limb or something.
Hey, I mean that the future's coming, right? So my necromancer looks like he could be a cyborg, like an old Terminator or something like that. So
And even then, it could be like necro power that makes it. It's not really metal and technology. It's magic. That's his fake armor, like a steampunk. I picture dwarves having
sure.
like steampunk stuff, almost like how Ash in Army of Darkness had the gauntlet glove.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different, cool things that we can do. And so kind of on that point, once we get the scaffolding built and we're able to kind of, implement some of the basic structures of the PvP and the PvE, get the leaderboards built out, then we can really start to iterate off this thing and really do some cool stuff. So, there's nothing wrong with even trying a couple things that maybe they don't work, right? But we know that we're going to have multiple different game modes. The PvE dungeon itself, even there, I want to do some things where we can kind of add a little bit of like story and lore to it. So the easy low hanging fruit is, okay, well, when you go into a dungeon, you hit level 5, there's a mini boss. The mini boss should have like a picture and a name. You know what I mean? Level 10, you hit a real boss. That guy again, picture, name, and a little bit more of like a theme behind it. And we should sort of have this almost like a good versus evil battle structure, right? Where there's someone that's trying to, or some force that's trying to like take over Lutera or whatever we end up calling the realm. And then you've got these heroes that are kind of battling for good too. So, some may be more neutral, that are more interested in just loot, right? And others that are maybe more, good, like a cleric or something, right? So I think we can give some more life to some of the components of it. But those are all the cool things that we can do down the road. The first couple things are like, yeah, let's just kind of get some of the functionalities working, get people playing again and having fun and just kind of gaming with each other.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is I want people engaged again with it. I want people to be excited before I start getting all excited about other
I love the battle royale idea though, right? So we were kind of thinking, everything is positioned like 1 versus 1, but it could easily be like a 4-player game or even like a team game, like a 2 versus 2 type thing as well. So I think you would, quite simply, you could just expand the map a little bit. Instead of like a 4x4 grid, maybe it's now an 8x8, right, or something of that nature. And then you just, okay, now you're taking turns between team A goes and then team B goes, right, and then you flip flop back and forth and you're just alternating there, and you're trying to coordinate with your team. So there's a lot of ways that we could make this. We could probably even build upon that, and do some things where there's more entirely different game modes. So And Ed, you'll remember this going back to the early days of the white paper with the former team. You know, the idea was you've got this Quadra game, but then beyond that too, you also have like an actual card game that's more like Hearthstone style. Maybe that's something we want to entertain, maybe not. Maybe we want to do something where we create almost like a very simple, like a 2D, you know, side scroller variant. We can like implement some of these mini games. I wouldn't say pretty easily, but we can certainly do them over time, especially if we're having fun with it and there's areas that people want to build and grow upon. So those are just some of the things that I'm kicking around in the back of my mind. And I know we chat a lot about it too, just kind of ad hoc when we're not digging into some of the more like definitive, hey, fix this, go here, do that. Josh, I need this from you. Like, you know, some of those more logistical things.
Yeah, we've talked. Well, I've been personally more involved because on the technical side, I can't do anything to prove me useful. I've tried to think a lot about game modes, gameplay, and everything, but it will be determined first. We have to go easy on everything. It's never bad to anticipate and have ideas for the future, but for now, let's stick to the initial plan and the initial stuff to make it work in the first place, and then we can see how we can extend. But for sure, uh, at least a medium-term vision for me is that you can't stick to only one game mode. Otherwise, if people are maybe too good, well, they're gonna be a bit annoyed and they're gonna be bored by the Quadra. And having more game modes is also a way to bring more gamers, because at the moment, if you like games but you don't like Quadra, for example, there is no reason for you to join Loot Heroes. So, there are many things we are trying to consider, and more in a more global way, regarding the discussions we got with Quadra last time, and with step by step, not Quadra, with step by step regarding Web3 and gaming. So that's a lot of things to consider when you try to build your game and your plans for the future. So I think we had pretty much a lot of experience recently with many sides, but it doesn't mean that we know everything. And for sure, as you mentioned, we are going to try things, and some of them may work, some of them may not work. But that's also part of the challenge.
Yep, yep, exactly. And I think you hit on some important components, right? So Rick and I are getting excited and talking a little bit down the road, but you know, initially the most important things are sticking to the basics, right? So one of the first things we talked about was like, what are we fixing behind the scenes? It's repairing the bits that should be working already. So the staking, unstaking, the ability to actually go in and like burn gear onto your hero again. You know, those are really the main and important components that we need to have just functionally, so people can actually interact and use their, you know, own heroes. And then, you know, the dungeons, we're gonna start switching that back over. And I forget, Rick, we may or may not have talked about that, but what I want to do this week is start to flip that where it actually goes back into the rotational. So instead of just a wide open access again, it'll just be like the daily dungeons. Not a huge thing, because you know you're playing a very basic version of the game without your own heroes in play yet, but we'll start to do that. Then we'll get implemented where you can actually incorporate your own heroes into the game. Then we'll have the PvE turn back on, right, with your own heroes. Then we'll get the PvP built out. We'll get our leaderboards, and then from there, we can start to implement those daily tournaments for PvP, the weekly tournaments for PvP, and then we'll have to figure out kind of how we want to do it with the PvE side of things. If we want it to be more of like a seasonal structure where you're going through and maybe it's like a month long season or something, you know, like the beginning of June to the end of June. And then it's, you know, whoever makes the furthest through the PvE 8-day rotational dungeon. In theory, I guess you could beat it in 8 days. or 7 days rather, to beat all 8 dungeons. But they're going to be probably pretty hard. Like you can't really beat them without having some element of gear. So then the missing component that we talked a little bit about, I think last time or maybe 2 episodes ago, was okay, what are the 2 ways that people can acquire gear? Well, number one, there's some existing gear that's out there, so people can buy it and they can burn it into their heroes, and that's how they're going to make their heroes stronger. Or number two, we need to implement like a merchant store where when you log into the game, well, if you're stuck on, let's say, level 6, in the Earth dungeon, and you're like, I need gear, otherwise there's no way in heck I'm going to beat these guys. Well, you need to be able to go into that merchant store, and then with the native token, which right now is loot, but I think we're going to switch that over to Gwen. With that native token, you need to be able to go and buy some gear that you can then use on your hero. And then, I don't know if I want to go a layer deeper, but might as well, I'm already sort of talking about it. There needs to be a distinction between gear that is what I kind of term as like impervious. So it's an NFT that will not disappear. You own it, versus gear that's destructible. And like it sounds, it'll get destroyed at the end of a season. So you can equip it on your heroes and you can use it for that season, but it's not something that'll stick with you forever. And we might have different time expirations on those based off of, kind of the durability of the type of gear. So you can think of it as, the better level gear, more durable, might last longer. So as an example, if you've got, basic level gear that you bought with some loot, maybe it only lasts 7 days and then it, the durability goes to 0. We can kind of have it function that way. Or if you buy something that's more expensive, well, then, if it costs more loot, maybe it lasts you 30 days before the durability goes to 0 on that. So the idea being, you don't really need to buy NFTs or anything to play the game. You can play it for free. You can earn loot while you're playing it. Then you can use that loot to buy more gear to, advance through the season. You can play it for free, but the person who wins it probably is going to be somebody who owns some heroes and owns some gear, from that vantage point. So anyhow, I don't know if you guys have comments on that or thoughts on that front, but those are the ways that I'm thinking about it. And then the little pieces that we'll still need to add to make sure that we make it a really true PvE game and a true PvP tournament style.
I don't have really questions about it because we've talked about it many times, and I think we mainly agree, at least on the main points here. I actually have one question for Ray, because
Yes, sir.
you mentioned earlier that we finally got all the pieces from the former team, but I feel that it already happened a few times before where we thought we had everything, and actually there were some few missing pieces and missing elements. So
That's a possibility still.
yeah, that was my question. Is it still a possibility that you have this? Yeah, I feel that they've put some goodwill in the transition. However, maybe things were a bit messy on their side, and also there was of course the fact that R was working alone. So I definitely understand that you don't work the same way when you work alone and when you work as a team. But so there is still this possibility. But the main thing, you find less things missing at the moment, right?
Yes, sir. I'm pretty sure we have everything. It's just a matter of getting all the pieces together the way they had them. And then, like I was explaining earlier too, things are kind of a year old, like all of the old, like the frameworks and the modules and everything, which for some of them isn't such a big deal, but for all the Solana side stuff, they've had significant updates. I kind of ran into the same thing with Discord bots. Like if you try to take a Discord bot from a year ago and try to like re-implement it, you end up having to update a ton of things because every couple of months they drastically change the API. So every couple of months, if you want to rewrite it, you can use the old API if you want, but then it gets into going like backtracking, and that's been a lot of our issue too, is every time we update something, all of the changes will affect all the other modules. So once we update something, we got to fix everything it breaks, and then update the next thing, fix everything it breaks, and we sat for a day and kind of did that, and then finally we were able to get the whole thing to build, and then we went from there. And then it was a matter of integrating it with all the different online services. I think we're going to end up simplifying it a bit, but I'm pretty sure we have everything we need at this point.
You mean you don't like the
Which is great,
skyscraper that they built?
Well, that's the thing. Is like it's amazing. It's literally enterprise level, enterprise grade. But in my humble opinion, we don't need all that right now.
Right.
Dare I say it? But
Shame on you. We're going to be a multi-billion-dollar company.
could be that. See, that's the thing. That's that's what I was told. We'd need all that stuff if that was the case too. So
It's kind of ironic, though, that they built out something that, is thinking in that direction. And then yet they were like, oh, well, we only minted, 25% of what we wanted. We're going to just kind of fade away. It's like, what? If your intention was to build a multi-billion-dollar company, then it shouldn't have hinged on selling a couple thousand more heroes. What the hell?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially with the foundation that was built, that was all. It's pretty solid.
Mhm.
I imagine at the time when everything was up and running, it was slick and it did everything they needed. And the error logging is cool because they got it set up through Sentry. So once I had that set up, it just emails me all the errors that happen on it. And so a lot of it's been pretty cool, but just getting all the pieces together without any specific direction.
Yeah. And again, I'm kind of like half joking. Like, obviously, these guys are not idiots. They've got talent. They've built some good stuff, too. So that's beneficial. But I'm just kind of having some fun with the skyscraper they built. That's, I'm thinking of like, yeah, somebody built the Empire State Building, but it's just vacant. Every single story is just completely vacant, and there's only like one little tiny shop in there, and you're like, why did you build this huge building? Like, did you need all that? Yeah.
It's a quality building though, like good, like top notch stuff.
Yeah. Anyhow, going on a tangent. Sorry, Ed. Did we take you off a different rail there?
Sorry?
So did we go down a different path there?
No. That's fine.
Yep. All right, let me check the chat here real quick and see if we've got any questions that people want us to go over. If there's things that people were talking about. No, mainly just memes in the chat, which is all fun and good and well. Do we want to talk about the token at all? Moving from Loot to Gwen?
Well, I think the democracy has spoken, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to. I mean, I think that's kind of like a foregone conclusion at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, it's at the same time a good thing because it's the community who spoke, and it's also rewarding somehow one person who is a main part of this project and main part of this team, if I can say, from the beginning. It's fun. It's the name of token that is not used yet, at least on Solana. Last time we checked, which is one main point for me because you can remember that even before the mint of the project, we had mentioned that having a token with such a not random name, but already used on every chain and sometimes multiple times on the same chain, was definitely not a good thing. And it's probably also a good way to take a fresh start with loot, and you can have 5 million loots. It's probably not going to be worth anything, even if we won't reset everything to zero for everybody. Maybe we're going to start back with Gwen, and what you will get to enter the tournaments and everything you're going to have to use will be actually Gwen and not loot.
Yep. And one of the things that I was chatting with Eduardo about, specifically around not so much the name of it, although it is really a nice kind of nod to Gwen, who's been an awesome member of our community for a very long time. So like, I'm happy to do it from that perspective. And it's also kind of just funny because it's like, the when token, right? And we've been stagnant for about a year, so like it does play well from that perspective. But from a tech side, it actually allows us to do some more things because going back to some of the earlier comments that Rick had made, around some rewriting and doing some different things, there are certain limitations that we have using the existing structure because it was built with a certain direction in mind. So changing some of these bits, like the token, can actually enable us to do some things a little bit different that are more in line with the current structure that we're taking too. So it's not even just about changing the name, but that is certainly a component of it. But there's also some other things developmentally that we can do different and better. Like even around like the chest airdrops and some of the things that we talked about where, well, a chest shouldn't just have gear. It should have maybe multiple different types of gear. It could have loot, it could have a hero, right? So being able to do those things does require us to kind of change the plumbing a little bit. So that's another benefit that we get out of this is we get to remove the hyperinflation of loot. We get to clean up the name duplication, triplication, quadplication. I mean, there's so many variants of loot around there. And then we also, get to kind of come back and do some things a little bit differently from a plumbing perspective that will be beneficial going forward. So I think a lot of these changes that we're making are awesome. And I feel really fortunate to have found Rick and Eduardo, who's that Solana Chad, who, I mean, man, he's been around on Solana as long as Solana's been around. So he can really help us make sure that the plumbing and the piping is solid.
Yeah, it definitely shows whenever he takes a look at something. He's like, oh, yeah, I've seen this. And then you just hear the keyboard. It's like, all right, here, try this. It's like
Yep.
really comforting. He's been really awesome to work with. When everything he sees, he's like, oh, yeah, I've seen this. I know this.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. I don't know if we need to go too much deeper from there for today. Maybe keep this one a little bit tighter. I think it's good to keep it 20, 30 minutes or so anyhow, because we'll probably lose people. I've been noticed on the YouTube videos, the first, revival video I put out, I think we had over like 100 people watch because it was like 22 minutes. Then for a couple others, it was like an hour and 30 and there was like 10 people. They're like, I'm not watching an hour and 30-minute video. So, yeah. But anything else that you guys want to touch on before we kind of close the shop down and get back to work?
No, I think we're pretty good to go.
Yeah, well, thank you for the hard work for now. My skills are not required, so I'm just checking time to time and testing what you guys can raise. But for now, only had to check the stacking and it's working very smoothly. And we also know that for people who remember the old stacking where you had to sign one transaction for each hero you have, we are trying to make it one transaction for the heroes to stack and unstack. It could be a big difference, especially for the whales, like a certain full meta.
Yeah.
We'll have the single unstaking rolled out first, and then Eduardo will keep going on the unstake all function. Because like you said, for the whales, like Mr. Fometa here, it's going to be a whole lot of clicking. Or heaven forbid a whale had him on a ledger. That's
Oh my goodness, yeah, that'd be even worse.
Like, those buttons aren't going to stand a chance.
Yep, and I think actually our buddy Timo is a bigger whale than me, and I think he's triple digit, and he might have him on his ledger. So
Jeez, okay, yeah, he's gonna want the unstake all.
yeah, exactly. A few people will be very happy to know they don't have to click. Even clicking through like 20 or 30 times, it's just tedious. It's like
too much. Yeah.
It's like, why are we doing this? We don't need to do that. So, well, good. All right, guys. Happy to report back to the community. We're making some good progress here. Excited to roll out some new features, in the coming weeks and months. And then I think before we know it, we're going to turn that corner and we're going to be playing PvP and PvE in the Quadra. So, yeehaw, man. I'm excited for it. Let's go get it. All right, guys. Have a great day. And then we will reconvene next week for episode 6.
Got it. Catch you all next week.
Cheers.
Yeah.